sort of after the turn of the century. I visited Humboldt Park in the 80s and 90s, but I have no lists or records of that. And my first list of Humboldt Park dates back to 2006. And from then on, I birded pretty hard for a little over 10 years. In those 10 years, I was lucky enough to see 206 different species, could document. And among them were some fairly cool birds. I think the first one that was extraordinary was in 2000. And in the same field of the snowy egret. Birds, it's like flamingo in the same, it's a winter bird and summer bird that shouldn't be here at the same time. So that was sort of the first thing. The same year I saw
I can't hear you, Edward.
Of course, my mic is muted. Doi. Sam mentioned that he's been having some Wi-Fi issues recently, so it looks like we might have dropped off here. But if you give me a moment here, he sent me some of the pictures of the stuff that he was talking about. And they're really quite remarkable photos. Let's see if I can pull these up. There we go. Let me share my screen here. So this is actually an image where he caught that scoter and that snowy egret in the same image here that he was talking about. Pretty wild considering that, yeah, these are not birds that come from really the same season. Normally the scoter is a bird that you expect to see in the winter, early fall, maybe early spring, late fall, excuse me. And it's just really kind of wild. It's also just a deep water bird. This is something that is generally found maybe on Lake Michigan or like the really deep turning basins. So to see it in Humboldt Park is pretty extraordinary. And snowy egret, for those of you guys who know that bird, is just a very rare resident in this area, period. Let's see if I can also pull up. Nope, that's from our last event. Let's see, there you go. There's a better picture of the snowy egret that he sent us there. Can everybody see that okay? You get some thumbs up here. Cool. Nice hanging out in that algae. And, oh, that's a spoiler. Okay, never mind. Let's see, is Sam back in here yet? No. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and then put Jacqueline on the spot here. If you wanna go ahead and take it away here and just move on to talking about stewardship at the site. Introduce yourself and what you do at Humboldt Park.
Yes, gladly. Let me, I'm going to be sharing some photos too, so let me get this pulled up. Okay, so hi everybody. My name is Jacqueline and I've been a steward at Humboldt Park for the last few years. This would be our fourth year. And I'm going to share some pictures of some of the things that we've been doing at the park. And also some of the folks who come out to volunteer. I will say that I definitely identify as kind of a generalist, and I'm excited to kind of interact with the bird folks here and learn a little bit, and especially get to know what might be interesting for me to keep an eye out while we're doing stewardship during the year. So happy to be here, and thanks for having me. So Humboldt Park is one of about 40 sites that are managed around Chicago. And some of you guys know all of this, but I just kind of wanted to start at like a high level. There are around 100 natural areas around Chicago, and Humboldt Park, it's interesting looking at it on the map because we're kind of, a lot of the natural areas are sort of spaced out, but we also know that wildlife kind of is traveling between different sites. And so I have been a steward with my partner Sarah for the last few years, and we host monthly volunteer stewardship events. This year is going to be an interesting one. I did not think we were going to be doing volunteering, but I just found out that we are getting the green light to do some volunteering in natural areas in Humboldt Park. So I'll give a little information later on if you're interested in signing up for our email list and staying tuned into what our plans are going to be. But so stewardship at Humboldt Park is all about, creating spaces that are going to be awesome for wildlife as well as the people who are enjoying these spaces. And I think that the other folks on this list are going to be able to share maybe some other photos and more different animals that they see at the park, but just wanted to kind of frame it that when we do stewardship, we're trying to create more wildlife friendly spaces for the animals that call Humboldt Park home, and there is a lot of different wildlife that lives there. So one of the main ways that we do that is by promoting plant diversity. And so we do a lot of invasive plant removal, hand pulling things, lopping saplings. We do seed dispersal and some native planting. And I don't want to get into too much detail with the different types of species that that we work with, but did just want to, for those of you who are interested and may know even a little bit more than I do about what types of birds or wildlife these different plants may attract, I did just kind of want to share this with you guys so you can get an idea of what we have been working to foster in the Humboldt Park natural areas. I'll show a map in a second, but as you can see, even just from these different species and thinking of things like shrubs and grasses, there's quite a variety of the types of habitat that we see at the park. And so it's fun to get to work in different areas and get to foster different types of healthy habitat. This is a map from a couple of years ago that we were using for planning some of our planting. And so you can see this is, north is at the top of the screen. We have Sacramento cutting through the park, and on the left is the field house. And it's interesting looking at the aerials and just thinking about the different lagoons and prairies that, that are scattered around Humboldt Park. But this snapshot happens to show the majority of areas that, that volunteers have been joining me to work in the last few years. And it shows where we did some of our planting a couple years ago, including some of those shrub species in the lower lagoon. And the lagoon on the right is the one that if you were to look a little bit further south, that's where the boathouse would be. So kind of orienting us there. But so even just looking at this image, we have on the right middle, the prairies, and then the lagoons are of course hard to miss, but different types of plants are doing well in those different areas. And it's fun to be able to foster, plant diversity in those different parts of the park. And then of course we get to see different wildlife in different parts of the park that are being attracted to those different plants. So in addition to trying to promote plant diversity that of course serves as food and shelter for lots of different wildlife, we also do a lot of litter pickup. And so this is from a couple of years ago, one of the cleanups that we did. We see a lot of litter in Humboldt Park. You guys are familiar with this kind of issue at a lot of the different Chicago parks, as we're such an urban space. But it's awesome to have people who are motivated to come out and join us to clear the debris from the natural areas. What's kind of cool is we're able to, of course, go past the fencing and get off just the main trails and get into the natural areas and really remove the litter from those areas, which is super important. I forgot to give a disclaimer. If you're hearing honking and a lot of noise in the background, I live close to Division and it has been a rowdy day here in Humboldt Park. So lots of activity going on outside, if you hear that over me talking. But of course, litter pickup is super important so that wildlife in the park are not consuming it. And I was bummed to see this squirrel really enjoying eating this plastic bag a couple months ago, and I was walking through the park. And so we know that, of course, litter is a problem for the aesthetics of a park, but also is definitely a threat to wildlife of all sorts. And you guys, I'm sure, are well aware that plastic and litter are huge threats to shorebirds and other types of birds. But as much as we can keep it out of the lagoons and keep it where it's better contained, it's making the park safer for the wildlife that is there. What's also interesting about stewardship, and I'm going to kind of transition to talk a little bit about the community of people who are coming out to help us. Stewardship is also important because when people see a clean park, they want to help to maintain that. So when we're out doing litter pickups and people are walking their dogs and stopping to chat with us and kind of getting interested in seeing a clean park and being part of improving it, it's awesome to have that community. So we have lots of different folks join us at Humboldt Park Workdays. We have families who are raising their kids around the park and want to both teach them and engage them in volunteering. We have all sorts of different residents from Humboldt Park, but also some of the shoulder neighborhoods like Logan Square, Garfield Park, Wicker Park come out and join us. I believe that is Stephanie spotted in one of the photos as well. She's been out to volunteer with us a couple times. We have a lot of students who join us to get volunteer hours, but then also get to know the park in a totally new light. So I love hearing the stories from kids who are like, I have grown up my whole life here in Humboldt Park and have never really paid any attention to the plants or to the wildlife here. And so it's great to have them out to get to know the park in a new way. We also do, as we're doing things like plantings and invasive removal, inherently we're doing lots of wildlife watching, so it's cool for them to get to see the birds and turtles and snakes and insects that we see there. We've also worked with a bunch of different local organizations, including Westtown Bikes. These girls are from the Girls Bike Club, which is a program focused on getting girls out riding bikes, learning how to maintain and care for a bike. And so I had a special Humboldt Park Workday with them a couple of years ago. We've also had folks from Student Conservation Association, some corporate groups and some college groups come out as well. And so, a couple of my favorite things about stewarding Humboldt Park, one is getting to work with so many different kinds of people and different types of community members who view the park in a different way. And then the other thing is getting to see the park through the seasons. And right now, things are starting to come into bloom, but it's just such a beautiful green lush space, and getting to see the park change week to week, month to month is just such a treat. And I always think it's interesting talking with birding folks, because you also see and are keen to spot such different variety in birds throughout the season. So from our point of view as the steward community, we get to just see how the feel of the park changes and the plant life. But it's great to get different perspectives from different folks about what they're spotting and what they're looking at. Just sharing my contact info for anybody who may have a group that they want to bring out, or if they want to share information or ask questions about stewarding or doing stewardship volunteering at the park. And then I'm also going to drop this link in the chat, because I have an email list that I can send to folks so that you can find out about future volunteer opportunities. So with that, I will turn it back to Edward. And of course, take any questions people have. Do we have Edward here?
Hello. Can everybody hear me? Yeah.
Yes, there you are.
Does anybody have any questions right now for Jacqueline? Other than please drop your contact info in the chat.
Will do. And that first link again is for my MailChimp that there's no spam or anything. I'm just dropping information about upcoming work days.
I have a question for Jacqueline. how can we get more garbage cans in the park? Because whenever I go and I try to pick up litter, it seems like I have to walk halfway around the park before I can find a garbage can. So I feel like that's like a huge problem, is that people have garbage and they're like, there's nowhere to put it, so they're just going to drop it. So is that like an alderman issue? Or every time I go, I'm like, there should be more garbage cans. So I don't know if you had any insight.
No, I don't have an answer. I share that concern and question with you. Yeah, I don't really have an answer. I think one thing that people sometimes are confused or frustrated to see is somebody putting a plastic bag on a fence and then letting people drop garbage in there. And I think that kind of, it's not a great aesthetic and it's kind of accessible to wildlife, but it kind of helps to, it's to the same point that there's not garbage cans in as many places in the park. I do know from my contacts that, because I'm a volunteer, I don't work for the park district, I'm a volunteer steward as well. And so whenever I talk to the folks at the park district, they do urge me or urge us to contact them and make a complaint, because when they receive that complaint, they need to react to it, they need to respond. And so it doesn't mean that they're going to fix the problem, but I am empowered knowing that when we see things like busted up walking paths or bridges or lack of garbage cans, it is worth bringing that up to them. But thanks for sharing that. I think especially getting back into it this year, and that we didn't have a lot of the huge Earth Day volunteer events that happen at a lot of the parks, including Humboldt Park. I think the park district, I'm sure, has been doing maintenance, but I think we're gonna see even more litter this year that we're gonna have to tackle.
When I was birding Humboldt Park, there was the same problem basically, but the superintendent, there was actually a superintendent, Nereida Aviles, and if I would go to her, she would get the crew out to wherever I said there was garbage and have it picked up within a few hours. And the problem is, and that's why I encourage everybody, always go to the office and report it, or report it to anybody who is working at the park, because put some pressure on them and have a good relationship with all the custodians. I mean, I always said hello to everybody. I knew everybody by first name, which to me seemed very important. And they were very willing to do this. And when the park was clean, people littered 100% less. When there is a lot of litter on the ground, people litter a lot more. So putting pressure on them, telling them that garbage cans aren't dangerous. It's the police that basically says garbage cans are dangerous. People can put bombs and drugs in them. It's all bullshit. Garbage cans are necessary. Put pressure on the people who work in the park and make them your allies. They're all good people who are working there. Say hello to the guys who cut the grass and, you know, everybody who works there, because they're the people we kind of depend on. So that would be my encouragement.
Well, on that note, Sam, do you want to pick up where you left off?
Yeah, I'll be very brief. I mean,
Sure.
you know, like everywhere else, if you go out a lot, you'll see a lot. So it's very simple. And I bird at Humboldt Park on average 2 or 3 times a week. So if you do that, then you're bound to see some stuff over the years. The guy who birded before me was Alan Anderson, and he had quite an impressive list, but I was pretty lucky. I mean, I don't know, I just got to see a lot of cool stuff, even though I have almost no March records and no October records, November records, because I was on tour, usually in Europe. But throughout the rest of the year, whenever I was in Chicago, I birded pretty heavily. And I also felt that enough people went to Montrose. So Montrose didn't need another person, but Humboldt Park, because it was in my neighborhood, just seemed a very cool place. And on average, I think of the roughly 207 acres of the park, I probably birded about 40 to 60 acres every visit, which included mainly the lagoon and the Prairie River. So those were the main areas. And the park over the years I birded, it changed enormously. There was a lot of mowed grass, but there was also a lot of unkempt areas. And so that was wonderful for thrushes and like my only Connecticut warbler and things like that. It became a lot more cleaned up, and much to my chagrin, they planted indigenous plants, but groomed them like poodle tails. And I told them, I said, this is like living in a house with a glass bottom and people are walking underneath and you're in bed. I mean, it just, birds feel uncomfortable. So that's basically, I think, all I can contribute.
Well, I have your pictures.
Connection
here.
is very bad.
Oh, don't sweat it. I love that analogy.
Okay.
I actually have your pictures pulled up here. I just wanted to, we didn't get a chance to share them all. But do you want to, can everybody see these pictures that I've shared here?
Okay. So this is a family, a whole family of cackling geese, which are kind of rare in Chicago, but to see a whole family at the same time is very cool. And you can see in one of the juveniles, you can still see some down on the necks. So that was a very cool encounter. And then one of the birds we don't really get to see much in northern Illinois is a cattle egret, a species that originally came across from Africa. We think it actually flew across to Brazil and then started moving north from South America into North America. So that was pretty cool sighting. Don't know what to say about Moto X4, but
there we go. Can everybody see that?
And great horned owls are probably more common than we think. They're fairly easy to spot in winter when there are no leaves. During the year, I'm not quite sure in summer. I've never seen a great horned owl. I don't know if they're not there or if we just don't see them. But there's a fairly good chance to see them at some point in winter. And the best way, in a way, is just follow the crows. And if the crows mob a bird somewhere, you have a fairly good idea. It's either a great horned owl or a raptor. And one time it was a northern goshawk. So that was pretty cool. But that's the great horned owl. And I thought it was beautiful how it blended with the aspen it was sitting on.
Can everybody see this image here? We got a greater white-fronted goose I'm trying to show.
No,
They're not.
maybe my connection is slow, but if it's the greater white-fronted goose, what happened was I wasn't exactly sure if the goose was it seemed a little funny and I didn't see the belly, so I wasn't 100% sure if it was a wild goose. And thankfully I saw it the next day out of the water, and then it was absolutely clear this is a wild greater white-fronted goose, grazing with all the Canada geese.
All right. Okay, so it keeps kicking me off a share screen here, but thank you so much, Sam, for sharing your experiences with us here. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Stephanie now to talk a little bit about her birding experiences in Humboldt Park. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Hey everyone, my name's Stephanie and I do a lot of birding at Humboldt Park, and I'm also on the board of Chicago Ornithological Society and lead spring and fall field trips at Humboldt. And this past spring, of course, our field trips all were canceled, so we weren't able to go out as a group, but our next field trip will hopefully be late September. That's when we usually have it. And then usually around late April, early May is when we have our spring trips. So just keep an eye out for those. And I started birding in Humboldt Park. I had to check my records and it looked like 2014. So I've been birding there about 5.5 years now. And like Sam, it's close to where I live, so I just started going there, and I really enjoy the park, and it's a great spot, especially during migration, to see a lot of migratory birds without having to go all the way to some of the other big hotspots. And I really like going there in the morning because I feel like, you know, going somewhere like Montrose can be pretty crowded, but Humboldt Park, you can really feel like sort of like you're the only one there if you go there early in the morning, like around 7 or earlier, except of course there's plenty of dog walkers out as well, but it's nice not having to fight the crowds. It's just looking over eBird and everything. I still have a ways to go to catch up with Sam. He's about 50 species ahead of me, but I'm working on it. I guess I actually just added Eastern Meadowlark, which Robin has seen several times before me, but I guess that was a new bird for me. So it's neat to be able to see, you know, a variety of species, even grassland birds, which you wouldn't necessarily expect to see at a place like Humboldt, which is in the middle of the city. And I also saw my first ever bobolink this spring. Actually saw it twice, hanging out in this kind of grassy area that's just outside of the field house, and that's kind of one of the spots that I always like to check out when I go to Humboldt. I feel like there's kind of like a hill behind the field house, which kind of seems tucked away and hidden, but it's a nice area where you can like spot warblers, because there's a lot of mature trees on that little hill, but you also have a good look out of the beach and the grassland area, where I've seen a couple of grassland birds, including Vesper sparrow, clay-colored sparrow, and the bobolink. Yeah, I was just also looking over some of my highlights of birds that I've seen at Humboldt, and some of my favorites are olive-sided flycatcher, and that's one that seems to show up pretty regularly in the spring. Is always a tricky bird to find. I also saw, I guess, it flagged on eBird. I saw 6 clay-colored sparrows this spring, which on the same day, which I guess was a lot for that species. So those are some of my highlights. Also, like Sam, I like to check out the lagoon, which is always a good place to look for migrating ducks. And birds just tend to congregate around the water. There's also an island in the lagoon that's always a good spot, because no one can really get to the island, and it has more dense vegetation, so the birds tend to hang out there, especially warblers, in the spring and fall. I was also just looking back at some of the field trips that we posted there, and I can share a couple of pictures from some of our trips. So just sharing, this is from last year. We did a Let's Go Birding Together bird walk for LGBTQ Pride Month. And that was in collaboration with the Feminist Bird Club, as well as the stewardship group with Jacqueline were there as well. And we had probably our biggest field trip ever. I think there were like 30 people. And Sam was there as well, and Robin too. But here are just some of the photos from that trip. We did this in June, which is kind of like a slower time to check out the park because my favorite times to go there are during migration. But there were still some breeding birds. Of course, lots of wood ducks are active at the park during the summer. And we saw a Baltimore Oriole building a nest right at the end of the trip. Another popular spot to check out is the barn swallow nesting colony that's under the bridge. And so that was pretty popular, especially with some of our newer birders, and it's a good one to check out during the spring. So yeah, here's a picture down here of folks checking out the swallows where they nest under the bridge. They also, barn swallows also nest on the field house itself, which is pretty neat to watch. And they have nesting chimney swifts that hang out and at the field house and nest in the chimney there. So that's pretty much what I got, but I'm happy to take questions too.
All right. Jeff, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Jeff Kane-Witzig, and I run the Instagram Humboldt Bird Walks. So I moved to Humboldt Park 4 years ago, and that was right when I started getting into birds. And that's actually when I started to realize that I had a pretty good ear for bird songs. So once I started to pay attention to bird songs, I had all these memories from childhood of birds that I recognized by ear, but never knew what they looked like. And so I started, working with some of the birding apps, Merlin Bird ID and the Audubon app, and started realizing that there's all this variety around me all the time. And so I would walk a couple of blocks east and west of the park and just kind of see what I could hear. And so that's how I initially got into it. And I started this Instagram just to really share what I saw with other people. And I really wanted the spirit of the Instagram to be inclusive of birders of all degrees and I guess capacities. Because early in my birding career, I was met with some folks that really wanted to tell me that I was wrong, which I was wrong, but they really were heavy on the shaming side that I didn't get something right. And I really didn't want that to be other people's experience getting into identifying wildlife. And so really I tried to put that into the Instagram and have that be very fun and enjoyable. I'm not somebody with, I don't work in wildlife. And so I feel like I have a connection to my neighbors in a way that is very, I guess if somebody sees a cardinal and that's the first time they've ever seen a cardinal, I want to help them celebrate that and encourage them to continue looking and hearing what changes. And so I go to the park 2-3 times a week, and I really use it kind of meditatively and therapeutically to, just to get space and to notice difference. And so one thing with at least how I bird, I can hear everything around me and I can identify what's going on. And so I listen for difference. And so whenever I hear something that's new for a season or something that I just don't know the bird song, then I perk up and I look. And so that's one way that I really enjoy birding, is just to hear what's different. And then, you know, spending so much time in the park, I also see what's different. And now I'm getting into the plants and slowly, you know, seeing the seasons of all that stuff. And so it's a beautiful park, and there's folks that have been here for generations before I moved in. And so it really is an opportunity to hear the music that's being played of the Puerto Rican community, of the Mexican people, and all sorts who have lived here for many, many years, Italians, Polish folk. Yeah, just an opportunity to connect with kind of the everyday person. And so it is really, I guess, something that I am excited to learn more. As far as like what I do when I go out, I have a loop that I run, and I really run that loop until I feel like I'm kind of full. So the way that I'm just highly sensitive to things, I feel like if I spend maybe over an hour and a half, I just feel full of content and information, and that's usually when I leave. So I try and find that sweet spot of like taking in information enough that I can digest and then move on. But as far as places that I look at and go to, I'm usually on the west side of Sacramento. So that would be the Swimming Lagoon and the Prairie River. But during migration, I usually go east of Sacramento and just south of the Big Lagoon. A lot of those trees there's a lot kind of flying through there. It's a little bit quieter. I guess things that I really enjoyed seeing this year, like with Stephanie, was the bobolink. It was something that I had heard 4 years ago in Wisconsin. That was the first time I'd seen it. And then I walked, you know, I got out of my car the other day, well, I guess it was a couple weeks ago, and I was like, wait, I just didn't know that they came through. And so I heard it before I saw it, and I kind of ran. I had to run all the way around to get a closer look. And then I also heard and saw a Savannah sparrow for the first time. I just like being surprised. And so I was trying to video the other day some chimney swifts, which are very challenging on your iPhone. But then a green-winged teal just kind of flew in. And the only reason I knew it was because my neighbor has had a green-winged teal in their flooded backyard for the last few weeks. And that was the first time I saw it. And then I was able to identify it by just like photobombing my other things. So that kind of levity and enjoyment is something that if I'm not feeling it, it's not going to make it into the Instagram. It's not going to be enjoyable. And so I try and make sure I'm having fun so that I can help other people have fun and hopefully bring more people into the community as well. Because I know there's a lot of people that would enjoy it if there was an entry point that felt very welcoming for them as well. That's it.
Thank you, Jeff. I definitely feel a lot of what you were saying there, especially, you know, following your account. It really does feel entirely different from just, you know, a high profile and, you know, super blinged out bird Instagram account. It really does feel very personal. And I think that's a really nice touch, honestly.
Nice. Glad you feel that.
Any questions for Jeff? All right, then I'll go ahead and pass it over to Robin here. And I understand that you have a map prepared for us.
I do. Let me just introduce myself first. I'm very similar to Jeff. I just started birding in the last like 5 years. And I live close to Humboldt Park, and I don't have a car, so it's really hard for me to get anywhere else. And so I feel really lucky that Humboldt Park is so close to me, because I feel like it's the best park. I'm sorry, it's the best park in the city. So I sort of feel like I've grown up as a birder in Humboldt Park, and it definitely feels like home to me. And it is someplace I go just to be mindful. And just walking around. There's so many different areas that it's like, I feel like it's several parks in one, which is really cool. Different areas have different feels, and so that's what I really like about it. It's like you're going different places even though you're just walking in a loop. So it's really cool. So I do have some pictures to share, and I do have a map, so let me share my screen here. Hopefully I can get this to work.
Just to validate your statement, if there's any time to be showing your park bias for Humboldt Park, now is definitely the time to be doing it.
It's not letting me present. Can you see this though? Kind of.
You might have to reshare it in a different mode.
Reshare in a different mode?
I know.
What does that even mean? All right, not sharing.
Okay, now this is just getting very matrix here.
Yeah, I don't know
Let's
what's
go ahead and stop the
happening.
sharing and just try. Go ahead and give that another shot. Give that
Okay, let's try again. Maybe if I think. Okay, I think maybe I have it now. Oh no. Sorry. One more time. We'll get it. We'll get it. Okay. There we go. Hopefully. Yes?
Looks good to me.
Woo! Okay. Sorry about that.
Nailed it. First try.
So I have the map here. Just to orient everyone. So this is the field house. This is the boathouse. And so this is like the main lagoon, and this is the Prairie River. I just made up names for some of these places, how I think of them, but I just wanted to talk about some of my favorite places to go. So I think my favorite place is right here, which I think of as the pocket. Because you're tucked in a corner and you can see different like habitats and different sorts of families of birds and stuff. So it's really cool. So if you go to the field house and you park there and then you go west around the corner, there's like a little wooded area, and eventually you get to an area that overlooks the beach. And so that area is really cool because the beach, you'll have, occasionally there'll be the ducks and the geese, obviously, but you'll have the barn swallows and the tree swallows. The barn swallows nest right there underneath the field house. So the barn swallows, tree swallows, but also you can get shorebirds here. So let's see, I had just had solitary sandpiper, spotted sandpiper, the killdeer were there. The killdeer often nest there's a scrubby area to the west of the beach that the killdeer nest in. And this is also where I last saw the eastern meadowlark. So this is scrubby area is really cool here. And then also closer up here, it's a grassy area, so you can get lots of cool sparrows there. So there's a lot of different kinds of birds you can get in just this little area. You can also overlook the smaller lagoon from here, where there might be herons or other waterfowl. And then in the forested area behind you, you're going to get warblers, you're going to get orioles. I've had brown creepers there. So I really like this pocket because I feel like there's so much you can see. Like hawks are really big here. So there's so much you can see from just this spot. So I think that's my favorite spot in the whole park. Let's see, but other good spots. This is the bridge that Stephanie was showing with the barn swallows. This is the formal garden, which the garden itself isn't really exciting, but if you go around it, there's some trees where you can get some good warblers. There's like a hill over here where you can get, again, good sparrows. The kestrel, I usually see a kestrel out over here. So that's good too. And then there's just other, I don't want to ramble on. I could, every corner of this park, I could just say, oh yeah, this is the best spot. This is the best spot. So I don't want to sit there and do that. But I thought this map might be helpful. And I didn't know if anyone else, any of the other presenters today wanted to chime in about, since we have the map up, maybe areas they wanted to talk about. It's up to you guys, but give it a few seconds. And if not, I'll just show some pictures I have.
I quite liked B. If you go to B, there's like a little island here.
Yeah.
And on the island, you can see most of the great horned owls were on that island here in that bed. And my American bitterns that I saw in the park were usually here. I also had hooded warblers or things like that in here. So this is also a very good area. Mm-hmm. And there's some native planting. This whole area from B to O over to N, all of that is quite good for birds. I've had nighthawks here and a roosting whippoorwill over here. So all of this is quite good.
Yeah, I agree. This area is awesome.
And it's funny where the formal garden is. This used to be like really wild, and I call this Thrush Hill because this was always full of thrushes. And then they kind of cleaned it up, and the thrushes kind of disappeared, unfortunately. But I mean, during migration, you could see all the thrushes. I mean, great cheeked, Swainson's, hermit thrushes, all of them basically sort of predominantly in this area.
There's that just west of the formal garden, there's a bunch of little short hawthorn trees, and that's one of my favorite spots because you can see warblers at eye level. They really tend to like hawthorn trees, and it's also full of white-throated and white-crowned sparrows during migration.
Yeah, I second that. Just west of J.
Snags, I was just going to say in the snags down here, the olive-sided flycatchers often perched. I mean, they always perch high, very upright, and a lot of times in this area.
So I'm curious, let's say you got a short amount of time, you're running late for work, or you're heading for a date, and you really need your Humboldt Park birding fix. What's the one spot that you're going to go to for a split second to try to get as many birds as you can in a short amount of time?
That's so hard for me to answer because it was funny. Jeff was saying that he'll be there like an hour and a half, and then he feels like he's been filled. I've spent like 5 hours there before. Like I'm like, oh no, I gotta check this spot. Oh no, I gotta check this spot. So I feel like that's so hard for me to answer. I think that I would, like I said, this spot here I really like, and then this area that Sam was talking about here. So I would probably just do the field house, check here, cross over, and check that area over here by the island. That's probably what I would do.
Yeah, when I'm short on time, I circle the main lagoon because I feel like I can do that in relatively short time. But yeah, I can circle the main lagoon and what I guess is I'm just learning is called the Prairie River, and then circle back to the boathouse. And it can be done in like an hour. And then if it's really birdie, then it can be more like 2 hours.
Yeah, I'm the Prairie River kind of through and through, and I guess I go to the big hill behind the rose garden. Just kind of take a walk. There's a big ridge there, and can hear right now peewees come through there, and a lot of other wooded things, catbirds and indigo bunting, and then when it's migration season, just west of that rose garden is just a blast seeing all the warblers there.
Mhm.
I would also say, do the lagoon, circle the lagoon, and then just basically drop down along the Prairie River and come back toward the boathouse, and you get a nice fix of Humboldt Park. And it's interesting because I think 80% of us only bird the north side of the park, which is north of Division, and hardly anybody ever birds south of Division, because it's basically a soccer field. It can be interesting for geese, and I love the name No Man's Land. That's kind of can be kind of good for warblers or other birds, but everything else is pretty much mowed grass. At least when I birded Humboldt Park. So if you need a ringbill call for your year list, that's a good spot to go to.
Actually, that kind of brings me to my other question. Thanks, Sam. Is there a corner of the park that you think doesn't get enough attention? There's sort of like a hidden gem that more people should go to and check out.
I'm actually gonna say, well, I'll go.
No, go
I'll
ahead.
go. It's funny because when I put like the forest here and then swinging around the baseball fields up here, because I start now when I come in, I have to come in from this and I come down this path. And so I start here now. And it's crazy, like you wouldn't think there'd be much here, but I had some like really cool warblers here last month. And then also like peewees, and I had a really interesting view of a red-tailed hawk trying to get a squirrel here, orioles. So I feel like this area is kind of completely just forgotten. But I think, anywhere there's trees, there's, on the right weeks, there's going to be warblers. So I was just, I guess, really surprised that I found so much there this year, because I usually don't come this way that much, because I'm used to coming from this corner over here, California and Division, but now I'm coming from North and Kedzie. So now I'm hitting this spot more, and it's just been interesting.
I think for me, when I birded Humboldt Park, one of the problems was all the noise, the traffic noise. And for me, it was always kind of a Zen thing, because you have to basically shut out all that in order to hear the birds. And and it was harder on the fringes. But as far as warblers are concerned, there are also like other spots like east of C. That whole strip there can be really good for warblers, and they can be a little noisy traffic wise, but I would say wherever you are, ultimately wherever you are, just take your time, open your ears and open your eyes, and that's the best spot to be.
Stephanie, Jeff, you got anything to weigh in on? And if folks have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat here.
I was going to add just the parking lot at the boathouse. I feel like I've had a lot of good birds there. And so that's where letter G is. And I guess Josh Engel had a Henslow sparrow in that area last year, which is pretty cool. That's one I don't have on my list. But just around the parking lot, there's some shrubby areas and trees that that can be good spots for finding migrating birds.
Yeah, I think every time I go to the arbor, I'm like pleasantly surprised. It's a good place to practice sparrows for me. Sparrows are very hard. I mean, I have a couple on lockdown, a couple of them just blow my mind every time. So that's surprisingly, that's fairly quiet for me around the restroom. There's a restroom building there, and then to where one of the small bridges is. That little loop there is really therapeutic, and I see a surprising amount of warblers. I saw a lot of common yellowthroats there, and then you can get thrushes and stuff if that little waterfall is on drinking. Right now it seems a little overly algae ridden, but maybe once that comes back, it'll be thriving.
All right, last call for any questions, but I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Judy real quick as we wrap it up here with a couple of event announcements. Judy?
Thanks, Edward. This was great. Okay, the highlight for me was meeting the Humboldt Park Instagram guy, because I'm a huge follower of that. Yeah, I love it. So yeah, thank you for doing this. Yeah, so the next patch chat coming up, we're pretty excited about. We'll be posting it tomorrow. It's going to be at Camp Pine Woods, which is a place where Chicago Audubon Society is restoring for nesting shrubland birds. We've had cuckoos and field sparrows and blue-winged warblers and a bunch of different shrubland birds nesting there. But, we're doing what we think is the right thing, but we don't know what the birds are telling us. So we can actually use all of your help to visit the site and then tell us where you are seeing shrubland birds. So we're gonna have a little mini blitz there that you can participate in if you'd like to. We'd love for you to. We're gonna have a map, a way for you to send us your sightings, and anytime between now and early July, if you can get out there and help us figure out which clumps these birds are nesting in, because there's lots and lots of clumps there. Then we're gonna have the steward is going to be there talking about it, and just a bunch of different people associated with Camp Pine Woods. It's also a pretty fascinating site. It's got a fascinating history. So it should be a good one. So we're looking forward to seeing you, and also hoping you can get out and bird between now and then, or even after, and tell us where those shrubland birds are. And the one final thing I wanted to say, on Tuesday, we're going to have Jim Phillips from the Forest Preserves of Cook County. He's a fisheries guy who is a birder, knows where every bird is in the forest preserves, and he's going to be talking about how they manage their lakes, sort of how they balance managing, between the needs of fishermen, boaters, and then waterfowl. So I think it's going to be quite interesting, and he's very knowledgeable about all the birds in the forest preserves. So I think it's definitely going to be worth it. So,
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you, Judy.
I posted in the chat the link to sign up for each of those.
Jim Phillips is indeed a great dude. I concur with that wholeheartedly. So with that said, doesn't look like there's any other questions. I want to thank everybody so much for coming and joining us this evening. This is a really fascinating conversation around Humboldt Park. And I know I'm going to definitely be chomping at the bit to head down there again. It's been a while for me. So again, thank you so much for coming and joining us tonight. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, the rest of your week. Maybe make it out to some of these other events that both Audubon and COS are hosting in the next coming weeks here. But have a great evening, everybody. Thanks a lot. Round of virtual applause for our speakers.
Yay! Okay.